Oh. Oh. Oh! This is the brand new SONY ZV-1. It's a completely brand new camera line aimed towards vloggers, YouTubers, first-time filmmakers, or seasoned Sony shooters that want a more compact camera system to add to their arsenal and to carry more of a compact camera on their casual outings instead of carrying a big old Sony a7 III with a 16-35G master lens. And it has a side flip-out screen. We've been asking this for years, and finally we get one. Now you're probably thinking, where in the world is a Sony a7S III? Where is a Sony a7 IV? This is not that camera, obviously. And I think really falls in between the Sony RX100 series and the a6000 series. Now, even though this camera seems really small, and it really is, and I mean, it only weighs like 294 grams, there are a ton of incredible features packed into this camera. Before we get into those nitty-gritty details, let's talk about the design of the ZV-1. The camera has a simple and overall sleek design that's reminiscent of the RX100 series. There's buttons and dials in the usual places. On the side of the camera is where you'll find an HDMI port, USB port to power and charge while filming, and a mic jack if you want to add an external mic to the camera. The bottom is where you'll find the SD card slot as well as the battery compartment, but what I'm happy about is the big record button on the top of the camera that makes it easy to press record if you're vlogging with your left hand. And whenever you press record, you can now see a red light indicator in front of the camera. Okay, so now let's talk about the video features of the ZV-1. Just like most Sony cameras that you know, the ZV-1 shoots in 4K with full pixel readout. You can use the same picture profiles like HLG, HDR, S-Log3, S-Log2. There's no Cinetone in the ZV-1, which is a shame because it just looks super buttery on the FX9, but it is a prosumer compact mirrorless camera, and I'm totally fine with shooting HLG and S-Log3. In fact, most of the video that you're seeing in this video wasn't shot with any picture profile. I just used the standard and portrait creative styles and made some adjustments like lowering the contrast by 3, lowering the saturation by 2, and the details by -5. And with those settings, the video just looks super clean and good straight out of the camera. And then in terms of photography, I just don't use anything at all. I just shoot in RAW, so it doesn't really matter. There's interval shooting for time lapses, which is really easy to use. And if you already have a Sony camera that has interval shooting, same exact thing. No difference there. The steady shot image stabilization is a little bit different. There is not only optical stabilization on the lens, but electronic stabilization inside the camera. So with that, there are 3 levels of image stabilization. One, you can turn it off and not use stabilization at all. The second is standard stabilization, which works fairly well. And then you have active stabilization, which works really well. Okay, so this is the stabilization test. There is no stabilization right now in this shot. So let's go ahead and take a look at the frame, analyze it, and you'll definitely see some jitters, especially as I'm talking. Okay, so now I turned on standard stabilization, and looks a lot smoother. I'm gonna stop talking so that we can actually see how stable this camera is. Okay, and now we have active stabilization on. As you can see, there's a slight crop factor, but the stabilization looks freaking incredible. No jitters. Oh, freaking love it. Freaking love it. It's not perfect by any means, and if you do move around a lot, then you might see some weird things happening in your footage. So really it's meant for static shots. Like if you want to zoom in all the way on this camera and you want your shot to look steady, then use active stabilization so that your image looks steady. If you are using active stabilization, there is a slight crop factor, just so you know. Okay, let's talk about the new autofocus system because it's awesome. In addition to contrast, phase detection, and eye autofocus tracking, you can activate a feature called Product Showcase Setting, which makes for quick and smooth autofocus transitions between a person's face and an object placed in front of the lens. This new feature prioritizes on distance and toggles between contrast, phase detection, and eye autofocus tracking to make autofocus smoother, quicker, and more natural. Pure autofocus magic. Good job, Sony. Okay, so the next feature is probably one of my favorites on the ZV-1, and that is the background defocus function. Basically, it's a feature where you can easily switch between two levels of background bokeh even while recording. By simply pressing the background defocus button on the top of the camera, you can rapidly switch your aperture from f4 or 5.6 down to f1.8. And all the other settings in the camera, like the shutter speed, the ISO, will automatically adjust so that you can shoot in f1.8. Pretty cool. Okay, so this is the background defocus test. I'm shooting at f10, meaning that most of the frame should look pretty sharp. So now I'm gonna press the background defocus button, which would bring my f-stop to 1.8. Here we go, 3, 2, 1. Oh, look at that. That is so good and so fast. Love it. The next feature is another feature that I absolutely love, is the fact that there is an ND filter inside the camera. Yep, that is incredibly handy for a compact camera like this that has a fixed lens. You can't really attach an ND filter in front of the lens, but because there's an internal ND filter inside the camera, I can shoot outdoors in extremely bright conditions, or even shoot time lapses at low shutter speeds so that I can add motion blur. Now, what's different about the ZV-1 compared to the rest of Sony's cameras is the internal microphone. Inside the ZV-1 is a directional 3-capsule mic, which is really designed to capture better audio, especially if you are vlogging. Okay, so now we're doing an audio test of the Sony ZV-1, and we're just using the internal audio mic on the camera set to the default record level at 26. It's fairly windy this morning, and so you may or may not hear some wind. I'll put on the windscreen in just a bit, but just wanted to do an audio test. So here we go, audio test. Test, 1, 2, 3. Test, 1, 2, 3. All right, so now let's go ahead and put on the windscreen. Just give me a second. Okay, windscreen is on, same settings as before. So here we go, let's have a listen. It's fairly windy. The wind is definitely blowing this way. And hopefully you won't hear any of that wind noise. Test, 1, 2, 3. Test, 1, 2, 3. And now doing an audio test using the Rode VideoMic Pro Plus on top of the Sony ZV-1. The audio record level is set to 15, and I do have the dead cat attached to the Rode VideoMic Pro Plus, so you shouldn't really hear any wind. It's not the best, but in a pinch, it's absolutely usable. And the last thing that I want to talk about is a feature that I absolutely love, and I didn't know I loved it until I started using it in the ZV-1, and that is the high frame rate. Super slow motion, shooting up to 960 frames a second. Yep.
Hush, hush now, everything's alright. Don't rush, we got all the time in life. Hush, hush now, everything's alright. Don't rush, we got all the time in life.
While it's fun shooting at high frame rates, it's a bit tricky to shoot because you're only allotted 3 seconds to film. But if you are shooting at 960 frames a second, you end up with about 30 seconds of super slow motion footage. Big thanks to Sony for sending this camera out for me to play with. I absolutely have been having a lot of fun for the past 2 weeks playing with this camera and the side flip out screen. And if you want to get one for yourself, you totally can. In fact, from now until June 28th, Sony is offering a special introductory rate for the camera and the Vlogger accessory kit, which includes the Sony Wireless Commander grip and a 64 gig SD card. So make sure to take advantage of that, link in the description below. All right guys, well I'm out of here. Thank you so much for watching this video. New camera, new gear, love it, love you, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye!